Aston Martin has been known for producing some of the best high-performance luxury cars in the car industry. With the latest iteration of their entry-level Aston model, they decided to kick the aggression factor up a notch. The design of the new Vantage is inspired by the DB10, the car that had featured in the latest James Bond movie, Spectre, and truly makes this car feel more like it's meant to give off a predatorial aura. Performance has also been improved along with cabin space and storage capacity. All this factors in to make this a superior car compared to its previous iterations.
Now, the brand new Vantage is part of Aston Martin's latest lineup, so that includes the DB11, the DB11 Volante and the DB11 V8. Although the Vantage is their entry-level model, it's not to be taken for granted. It packs quite a punch for the amount of money that you'll be paying for this car. Now, let's go through the design aspects of the car and see why the new Vantage is more superior to its predecessor. So first and foremost, we'll start out with the front. Now, the front has sparked some controversy in the past due to the massive front grille. And some people didn't like the fact that the grille was just uncut and was a massive piece of just basically grille, taking in air as you speed through the roads. Now, the grille is Aston Martin's way of reminiscing towards its more hyper and more high-end sports car, which is the Vulcan. So as you can tell, the whole scooped type of formation that has this type of upper area to the lip of the car makes it look more reminiscent of its Vulcan model. Furthermore, we also have the front headlights, which some people felt were a bit too small and looked a bit too similar to Japanese sports cars. You may think that it looks more like an MX-5 or such. However, Aston Martin's idea towards it was that they wanted to make it look more aggressive. So when you see a very sleek, very small looking headlight, you think you're looking more at a Predator of sorts. So this is meant to be like a predatorial supercar, sports car on the road, as Aston Martin wants to basically convey that message. This specific model has a few very nice looking features in the headlights themselves. Of course, the headlights are made of carbon fiber, although the rest of the car's body is made of aluminium. Now, the carbon fiber really looks nice in the headlights since it makes it look more aggressive, and the black contrast towards the other colors that you may have also gives it a nice type of feel to it. Furthermore, we've got the lights for the turn signals, and the turn signals are both the daytime running lights and the turn signals. So when you're driving around in the day, you have them running as daytime running lights are with the new modern cars. However, when the turn signals come on, these very nice looking wings, which Aston Martin wants to make them look more like the Aston Martin badge wings, just flash and make them look like a more sleek and clean type of daytime running lights slash turn signals. So moving away from the front and into the side of the car, we see that the lines just look unbroken and very sleek, running all the way from the front bonnet up the car and into the rear bonnet. So looking at the sides themselves, we've got this nice looking contrast, and this isn't just design, it's also functional. This basically helps cool the engine as air is taken in through the front and released through the sides, coming towards the sides of the car and coming off the back. As you can see, in the back we also have a small spoiler which helps disperse that airflow and keeps the car grounded and gives it more downforce. Moving into the rims of the car, we can see that this car sports 20-inch rims, and the rims are a silver finished rim, and it contrasts the car really nicely. The yellow tang of the car, which is a pearlescent yellow greenish hue, gives the car a nice contrast towards the choice of rims themselves, as well as the brake calipers being red is a very nice choice. So it just makes the car look much more professional, much more sporty in my personal opinion. Furthermore, the rims themselves really give it a stance and a feeling that it's more predatorial, as Aston Martin wants to convey. Now, when Aston Martin was designing the new lineup, they wanted each car to be unique, very prominent standing towards their other generations. So the Vantage itself shares nothing similar towards the DB11, which was the car released before it of Aston Martin's new lineup. So the only thing that the Vantage and the DB11 have in common is the door handles. So only two parts of the whole car are shared between this car and the DB11. So it makes it feel more unique. It feels more prominent in the car industry as a sports car and as an Aston Martin. Furthermore, we also look at the door mirrors, and they look much sleeker and have this type of spoiler design to help airflow just flow through the side of the car up to here and out the back, as the rest of the car basically generates the airflow, helps cooling the car, helps keep the car down, helps keep the car planted on the ground as you drive around at high speeds, or even cruising around the city from journeys from day-to-day life, or anything you need basically when using the car. We can also look at the bottom of the car, and we have this massive side skirt which also helps airflow through the wheels, out the back, and basically just keeps the car planted further as well. So all of it comes together and gives this car a harmonious design of a type of aggressive looking predator. Basically what Aston Martin wants to convey is something comparable to a shark, a tiger, or any other predator you feel is an apex predator. So this car is meant to convey that type of striking similarity towards these types of apex predators. Now we move on to the rear, and the rear is one of my favorite parts about this car. I honestly think Aston Martin really knocked the ball out of the park with this one, and it makes the car look modern and aggressive at the same time. So firstly, I'd like to talk about the design aspect of the rear itself, how air is meant to come through the front of the car and up the back of the rear spoiler. The spoiler isn't too massive, which makes it look much more aggressive in my opinion. Now we'll move on to the taillights, and this is one of my favorite parts about the whole rear. The taillight just looks so modern by the fact that it's just one single streak of taillight coming through the whole car. It's not cut in the middle or split up by any other bodywork, so it just makes it look much more modern. The taillights themselves, when they're switched on, have a tri-beam style, and that's reminiscent of the Aston Martin wings. And I really like that with Aston Martin. They love to integrate the logo's wings into different areas of the car. Like I mentioned, the front with the daytime running lights, as well as the rear now with the rear lights themselves. And when you switch on the rear lights at night, when you're driving around the city or cruising around town, you can see that both of these lights switch on as well as these ones. However, when you switch on the brakes, press on the brakes, you'll realize that these ones will switch off and the central one will light up. So it just makes it look much nicer the way everything flows and everything switches on and off together in harmony, in my opinion. So moving on from the taillights, we'll look at the Aston Martin badges. And on the new models, Aston Martin has started to integrate the new double badge. So double badges is basically the top area will have the Aston Martin emblem with the wings, and the bottom area will have the Aston Martin lettering. And I really like that integration. So basically when you bring up the boot to put in storage, when you bring in stuff, this badge will go up, which is the Aston Martin wing badge, while the lettering will stay down. So as you're putting things into your car, you'll see the Aston Martin lettering and you know that you're driving a magnificent Aston Martin. Moving a tad lower, we look at the magnificent rear diffuser. The rear diffuser is very prominent with its wide style coming off from the bodywork itself. So it really looks more aggressive and like a race car, as Aston Martin is trying to convey with the new Vantage. The rear diffuser has the integration of the rear grills, so air will just flow through and out the rear grills, as well as the dual exhaust pipes. And trust me when I say the exhaust note sounds amazing. Aston Martin really has given this car a type of raspy feel, so you don't know that the car is turbocharged. All in all, the rear, like I've mentioned, is one of my favorite parts because it integrates the modern design, Aston Martin's known style, as well as the aggressive look that Aston Martin wants to convey with this car. Moving on to the engine specifications of the car actually has a 4-litre twin turbocharged V8, which is shared with the AMG GT. The car is able to produce a little over 503 brake horsepower and 505 pound-feet of torque to the rear wheels. So this car actually has rear-wheel drive, as well as it can go from 0 to 100 in just 3.6 seconds. So you know that this car means business. It has a top speed of 195 miles per hour, which roughly translates to a little over 310 kilometers per hour. So the car is basically a sports car built by Aston Martin for the roads, and if you want to do it for track use as well. So you know that the car has been powered up compared to its predecessor, as well as compared to the DB11 itself, although it has just a V8 engine. Now it obviously has the Aston Martin known plaque, which mentions the name of the person who last inspected the engine. The engine of course looks magnificent as well, since it has this type of aluminium grille, and just the engine itself looks very modern and very nice. What Aston Martin really does is tries to keep the engine looking quite sleek, since they know you won't be messing around with the engine, so no components are really shown off, nothing is really exposed. So if you need anything done, you just come to Aston Martin and they'll basically do it for you, unlike some other Japanese cars or other tuner cars. So all of it is not supposed to be touched by the person themselves and supposed to be sent to the service center for Aston Martin to take care of for you. The car also has an 8-speed automatic gearbox. However, a manual has also been rumored to be coming out soon as well. So for anyone who prefers a manual over an automatic, you have not to worry, because Aston Martin probably is going to be bringing out other variations as they did with the previous generation Vantage. Now, as always, we move into the interior of the car. So we'll talk about a few new features that have been integrated into the new Vantage, as well as just my personal opinions about the car's interior itself. So let's jump right into that. So simply put, Aston Martin is known for luxury, and leather is one of the most luxurious things you can find in the car. And this real good quality leather, you can feel it. You feel it when you're holding the steering wheel, you feel it when you're sitting in the seat itself. So Aston Martin really doesn't like to cut corners with this stuff. The steering wheel itself looks much more sporty, it's much more squared off like the 177 or the Vanquish S. And as most of us know who know Aston Martin, the 177 was one of Aston Martin's best cars produced. It had that charisma, it was very sporty, it felt like a race car for the road. And Aston Martin really wants to convey that with the new Vantage as well. The paddle shifts themselves are aluminium, so they're much longer and much easier to reach as you shift through gears in manual mode. Now, like I've mentioned before, Aston Martin has borrowed a few things from Mercedes's AMG designs. So looking at the car itself, the sticks in the back for the turn signals, for the windshield wipers are all taken from the AMG cars, as well as the infotainment as well. Aston Martin has actually had a deal, as we've seen with the DB11 as well, that they basically have the previous generation of the latest AMG infotainment. So let's say the new AMG GTR has the new infotainment from 2019. This one will have the infotainment of the previous generation AMG GT. Looking at the infotainment system itself, it's a small screen in the center console. It's an 8-inch display which has basically more or less the same GUI as the previous generation AMG style. However, Aston Martin has tweaked it a little to include Aston Martin badges, Aston Martin pictures and such, just so that it's not too reminiscent of the AMG itself. As well as we have the Daimler setup that we spoke about before. The Daimler setup is actually a touch style setup which you can basically gesture to carry out different commands on the infotainment system rather than having to press buttons here and there when you need to basically control the infotainment as you drive along. Something I really love about the interior is just the central tunnel. It looks like a James Bond style car with all the buttons set up in this V type of formation. So you've got your start engine up here, very massive, right there just for you to ignite the car and put it into life. You've got the neutral mode when you want to put the car into neutral, reverse when you're turning backwards, the park brake, as well as the drive basically gear. So you can shift through all these gears. You've got 4 buttons just to change from each gear when you need to. A few other buttons in the central tunnel include your hazard lights, your parking sensor on and off button, your rear and front view cameras, which can be either displayed in your infotainment system or the driver cluster, your radio and your media for the infotainment system as well. You can switch on and off traction control as with most sports cars. You can mute the infotainment system if you need to take a call or you just don't want to listen to music anymore. You've got your automatic button as well as your satellite navigation and your telephone when you want to make calls through the infotainment system itself. Finally, in the central area, we've got your climate controls. So you can cool and heat your seats. Yes, this car does have cooled and heated seats for your different occasions when you need them, as well as your air conditioning system. So you can control them all through these knobs, as well as you can switch on your reading lights and lock and unlock the doors. So everything is within the central area. You don't really have to move around. So if you're driving and you've got a passenger beside you, he can or she can basically control everything that they need from the central area. Now, something I really love about luxury cars is the fact that you can customize them however you want. Now, the exterior, like I've mentioned, is a yellow tank. It's a greenish yellowish pearlescent color, and the interior really contrasts that well with the greenish yellowish type of stitching as well as the leathers implemented too. So looking at the seats, you can see that there's this dual stripe style, and that's finished in a yellow tinted style green type of leather with the sides as well as the stitching. The emblem of the Aston Martin is also made in this nice color of stitching. So everything just comes together and looks really nice to contrast the inside and the outside of the car. So when you look at this car, you can tell that it's a very luxurious and a very personalized car. Finally, I'd like to talk about the different modes in the car. Now, Aston Martin has removed something called the comfort mode. So there's no longer a comfort mode. There's sports, sports plus and track mode. So if you want to cruise around, you can cruise around in sports. Sports plus is for a more performance-based style for the road still, and track mode is obviously for your track days when you're going out pushing the car real hard on the track in a safe zone. So in conclusion, the new Vantage is one of the best Aston Martins to be released in the new generation. It's got the looks, it's got the performance, and it's got the luxury factor that Aston Martin is known for. All in all, it ticks all the right boxes, and like I've said, in my opinion, it can be one of those highlights of Aston Martin's new generation of car. With that, I will end the video, and I hope you liked it. If you did, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to be up to date with my latest content, and thank you for watching.